Okay, well, move along to football then. So, on a big week of football with round three of the championships in Kildare here. First of all, the Joe Malamotors Senior Football Championships. Some fantastic matches to be looking forward to in the round three in Group A. First of all, maybe we look at that one, Ger. And first of all, let's thank Tommy there, because he's put in a huge amount of work. There was no electric nick from him. He was there as graphics, and he has put all the permutations in place. And also, can we also say a thank you to Noel McKenna? We had invited Noel on to help us with this particular discussion. He's the chairman of the Kildare CCC, but unfortunately our recording time didn't suit his availability, and he was very disappointed. We were very disappointed, but look, that's the way the show will go on. But in fairness, Noel had a good look at what we were doing and saying, and he's happy with what we're about to say. And also he promised that he would return to talk to us when they're talking about other possibilities in regard to the championships in at a future time. So thank you for Noel for that. Ger, Group A, we have round three, Selbridge versus Clahorenco. That's on Saturday at 3:30 in Clane. And then we have Athy versus Johnstown Bridge on Saturday also. Mangard Park at 3:30. What are the permutations there, Ger?
This is one of the easier groups, but yeah, just echo those thoughts first up to Tommy and Richard as well, because Richard did a piece in the Kildare Nationalist last week, and it's up on the Kildare Nationalist website now as well. But the two lads have done incredible work going through every possible permutation, and there are many of them. And I suppose the big one that maybe people aren't fully aware of sometimes, it's a bylaw. I think they came in last year. Obviously, people will know that the leagues are obviously run on points first of all, and then if there's two teams tied on points, that it goes to the head-to-head result between those teams in the group. And then if a third team is involved, it was previously the score difference across the three group games that separated the sides. But the GAA, I think in their wisdom and in fairness, it probably is the right one, because even looking at a game like this weekend, without kind of thinking anything against Clahorenco, but a side who don't have much to play for there, they're out of the championship, win, lose or draw, up against a very strong Selbridge side. That could potentially, if that maybe would skew the result, and if there was a large result then as well, that score can, I suppose, skew things a little bit unfairly. So it is, if there are three teams level on points in any of the groups across the championships, they're separated then by just the matches that involve those three teams. And whether the other side, whether the bottom side or the top side, if their result doesn't come into play. So not so much an issue in this group, but I'm sure we'll see it in other groups. And I have been at games in Cedral, St. Conleth's Park and Mangard Park, and a point down the road has had a huge impact on the game that you're watching. So it can be very exciting. But this group is really one of the more straightforward ones. You would imagine Tommy again has done a lot of permutations there about what happened if Selbridge were to lose. I think, without again being disrespectful to Clahorenco, that you'd imagine Selbridge will win with a bit to spare there, particularly coming off the back of an excellent win against the Athy last week. And Micheál McDermott, I suppose, will be very keen for them to continue that momentum. They've hit a bit of form now. They weren't exactly fantastic in the opening couple of rounds, but on the back of that win now from against the Athy, you'd imagine that Selbridge are really up the championship pace, and they want to kick on now against a Clahorenco side with not a huge amount to play for there other than pride. But then, yeah, the Athy Johnstown Bridge game is one of the games of the weekend. I think I mentioned the Athy; they were so poor against Selbridge the last time, up against maybe one of the form teams in the championship. Johnstown Bridge were very unlucky not to get a win over Selbridge in the opening round of the groups. Only a last gasp equalising point by Aaron Brown denied them a victory there. So yeah, Johnstown Bridge are in top form, and it is a game with a real edge to it. The winners will have a chance to progress into the quarterfinals, while the losers will go into the preliminary quarterfinals. And I suppose, well, if we go back to our rankings that we had last week, Johnstown Bridge have a chance maybe to break into that top four. We're saying that the top four sides in Kildare maybe were a little bit ahead of the rest. This is a chance for Johnstown Bridge to show that they aren't. Again, one of the questions that we had during the week mentioned that possibly Johnstown Bridge are one of the big underachievers in the county. If anything, I'd say Johnstown Bridge are nearly an overachiever, given the size of the parish out there. The three senior clubs, along with Carbery and Clahorenco, pulling out of a very similar area, for Johnstown Bridge to be battling as well as they have in senior championship over the last best part of a decade now at this stage. It's huge credit to them. They obviously have some standout individual players, but you need more than that to compete at senior level. And I think they've done very well over the last number of years. And they've a real chance against Athy, and again, you're trying not to be too reactionary. I would have had Athy as a real challenger ahead of that Selbridge game, but they're just so poor that day. You'd imagine they can't be as poor again. They certainly will have to be an awful lot better. I'd still fancy a tie to win, but yeah, Johnstone Bridge have a real chance, and it's definitely one of the games of the weekend.
So, Tommy, let's look at the Joe Mann Motors Kildare Senior Football Championship Group B, and then this weekend we have Raheens versus Maynooth. That's on Saturday in Clane at 2:00, and on Saturday also at 3:15 in St. Conleth's Park, Seagulls in Conleth's Park. It's Naas versus Sarsfields. Would that be the tie of the weekend, Naas versus Sarsfields, or is it just a matter of pride at this stage between those two?
Well, yeah, on paper, Naas versus Sarsfields is always going to be the tide around. But as regards, the weight of the match and the meaning of the games and all that, I think it would be quite down the pecking order this weekend. That's just me being kind of, looking at the broader view of everything. I will just go back and echo what Ger was saying as well, because I know you said about these graphics, but Richard did put in a lot of work on spreadsheets as well that helped me sense check a lot of this stuff. So a big thanks out to Richard as well, because this was a pain all week to do. But lucky enough, this isn't as painful, this group, because it's pretty kind of cut and dry at the moment and how it's looking. Well, it is at the top anyway. So obviously you see Sarsfields and Naas are guaranteed their quarterfinal spots. So just a draw for Sarsfields over Naas will do the job for them. Obviously a win, we'll put them in a win for Naas, then that's all about positioning. Whether you're playing a preliminary quarterfinalist or whether you're playing somebody from one of the losers groups, that's the only difference in that. As regards that Naas Sarsfields game, you're thinking to yourself as well, what if Sarsfields put in the performance of the year this weekend and beat Naas when it doesn't really matter? I mean, it's you
what
just
if they don't go, Tommy? I mean, Sarsfields have lost league finals to Naas now.
Yep.
They had the advantage, you would have thought, in this league final, given resources available, county players, etc.
Yep.
And the way they lost, having built up such a good lead, if that were to happen again, I don't know what that would do to the morale for Sarsfield. So in a way, you'd nearly be banking on Sarsfield to put in a big performance here and to want to put in a big performance here, no?
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, when I was walking out of St. Conleth's Park after that league final, I was chatting to Naas to the left of me, Sarsfields to my right. And I just said, kind of quietly enough, but psychologically, that was a hammer blow for Sarsfields. Yeah. It really was, because they had everything there for them at that first half performance. But to go down the way they did in the second half to a Naas team that was still missing county players, they still had other players out injured that would be fighting for starting places, and for Naas to basically pull up at the end winning, must have been devastating. Now Sarsfields have, they've kicked on quite well in the championship so far, and a lot of their young players have really stepped up in the championship. Conor O'Donovan, the Lokmans, these guys, which is a really good sign for mentally these young lads. Maybe they don't care. They take every game as it comes. So as a collective, then you would say. But again, if Sarsfields do put in a big performance this weekend, it can only help them. What I'm just saying is, you don't want them to put in that one big performance and that to be the one this year. But there's a couple of ways of looking at it. But just to move on then quickly to that Raheens Maynooth game as well, because there's definitely something big on the line for that. And we're looking at two teams and how they performed in their other matches. So if you're taking Maynooth there, just need a draw, again, because of the scoring difference. And that scoring difference probably does reflect on how both teams got on. I'm just going kind of recency bias there at the moment by looking at the Raheens performance against Naas last week compared to the Maynooth performance against Naas, two matches that I was at. And Maynooth, for longer periods, put it up to Naas. And had some really good matchups around the field, whereas Raheens had a really good first 10 minutes and then completely fell away. So, there is a big performance in Raheens. They probably do have the players to get in amongst that Maynooth team. That'll be a good game. That'll be well worth looking at over in Clane. So we'll see who comes out of that. But both teams really need to pick it up, whoever goes through.
Richard, you with your great historic head on you, if Naas were to lose to Sarsfields, that would be their first defeat since what, 2019? The championship? 19, 29?
I think it's 2019. Yeah, they haven't lost.
2020, I think. Was it 2020?
Was it 2020?
Yeah, 4 in a row started in 21, isn't it?
2020. So they won 2021, 22, 3, 4. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it would be. Yeah. But they haven't lost through this winning number of years. They haven't lost any championship game, and the same in hurling. In fact, for even longer. An even longer period, so it's some record, all right. So they'll want to hold on to that. It's a good point.
Absolutely, yeah, it is, yeah. Okay, so those are the Group B permutations. Interesting games there. Then Richard, you might have to stay online there now and go for the Group C, where the permutations we look to see how Moorfield and Clane and Allenwood and Kilcock will get on. Moorfield versus Clane, that's on Saturday the 6th in St. Conleth's Park at 7 p.m. Cedar St. Conleth's Park. And then you have Allenwood versus Kilcock on Sunday in Clane at 1:45 Conneff Park in Clane. Is that fairly straightforward group, Richard?
Yes and no. I mean, there's something on the line in both these games. They're almost two different competitions here. At this point, you've got only one team going through to the quarterfinals, which is obviously the top team, and then Team 2 go through to the preliminary quarterfinals. But the bottom two are effectively playing in a relegation semi-final, because whoever finishes bottom of this group go into the relegation final against the team at the bottom of Group D. So there's huge implications of both games. Really, probably more so the relegation one, but even in terms of the top one, you know, in terms of avoiding that preliminary quarterfinal and getting straight through to the last 8, getting an extra week off, I think that's hugely important as well. And I think you've got two teams who are, you know, kind of at different stages in a way. Moorfield are very stable, as you know, in terms of their personnel, in terms of their performances. We said it, I think, last week. They've been trundling along quite nicely, a little bit under the radar, but still winning. And you know, I think they'll give Clane one hell of a game this weekend. I think Clane have been a bit more inconsistent, and at both ends of the field. I mean, they've been racking up some good scores, but conceding quite a bit as well in terms of goals. Those goals Kilcock got against them towards the end of the round 1 game, and they missed a few as well, are still jarring with me a little bit in terms of knowing what Clane are all about. So that's going to be a good game, and there is something significant, I think, riding on that one, Moorfield against Clane. But the other one is almost the big one, you know, in this group for the weekend. And I think it's almost a 50-50 in terms of I waver every time I think about this game. I waver, and I have to remind myself, have I put something in print about a prediction for this one? So I actually did. I think in the paper I put Kilcock to win this one, but you know, that's a 50-50. And really what I was going on there was Kilcock has scored 6 goals in 2 games, having lost both and now facing into a relegation final potentially. So if nothing more, they've shown that capability. Allenwood have put up some good scores from a point scoring perspective, and they've got Owen Bagnall back. You know, you could make a case for both, really. I'm going to sit a little bit on the fence on here and say I'm still at 51-49 in favour of Kilcock on this one.
Pat, sorry, just to jump in just as well, because we often say like every score counts in these group stages. Just looking back at that game against Allenwood there, where they got a big victory there, that score difference has given them now the advantage of needing only a draw against Moorfield, while it means that Kilcock only need a draw against Allenwood. So those couple of scores in what you think was a bit of a rout for Clane over Allenwood, you know, either way could make a huge difference when you're looking now at 2 games, as Richard says, that are pretty much 50-50 there in the final round. So it really is, every score does count in the group stages.
Jared, this came up a lot last year as well in the group stages for that final round. Suddenly you're looking at people are in the stands and they're looking at tables. Oh, they're +4 now. They're +3. They're +2. They're dropping. So when you see teams in group stages pulling up, bringing on subs, kind of, you know, seeing out games, you know, that I would have thought people learned last year, but I saw a few games now where, you know, teams have taken the foot off the pedal, and these, like, that score difference is absolutely huge at this stage. Now, this is obviously the last round. We're not going to see it again till next year, but it's something that teams really need to keep in mind.
Just Jerry, maybe you might pick up on this, Jerry. Teams qualifying directly to the semi-final, they miss a game, whereas the team going through the preliminary, they get another game, and it brings them on a little bit.
Yeah, well, this is it. It's kind of depends who wins then afterwards. If you've won after a rest, you'll say it's fantastic. If you've lost, you maybe say the extra game would have been beneficial. So yeah, I always think it's whatever way that game goes afterwards, the manager will spin it either way. Yeah, look, there's some clubs, obviously some of the clubs with the bigger panels and maybe who don't have as much rating on the games this weekend. There's an opportunity maybe to get a rest as well. But yeah, look, I think it's the victor picks their poison after that one really, and it's how the story is spun.
That's it. Group D. Easttown versus Confy. Saturday in What's that?
You're explaining this one.
No, this is between yourself and Tommy. Easttown versus Confy in Cedar St. Conleth's Park on Saturday evening at 5:15. And before that, you have Carbery versus Cara at 5:15. Also, in this one is in Mangard Park. This is the one where you'd need, I suppose, Einstein to work it all out. Cara are on top with 4 points. Easttown with 2. Carbery with 2. Confy with 0 points. Tommy, you start. Richard, you finish.
Thanks very much.
One game at it. You do the Easttown Confy one then, Tommy, and then
yeah. I mean, like the permutations that we've done are on the right hand side, and they are for all of these, and that's fair enough. We're not going to go through them one by one because people can read them and just take them in and try keep them in their heads for when it happens. The one thing I will say before I just talk about Easttown and Confy is that the bottom bit there, that Carbery cannot be relegated in any scenario. Richard had just reminded me to make sure to put that in there. When I published it yesterday, a few people did come back and question it, as in, what if this happened? But if Confy, if Carbery beat Cara or Carbery lose to Cara by a heavy score and all this kind of stuff. But it is worth remembering that if Confy were to beat Easttown by a certain score, that would affect the Carbery situation, that Easttown's score difference comes down, which automatically would keep Carbery safe and put Easttown in trouble. Now, I don't know if I explained that too well, but every match affects the other score difference. Carbery's in that mini league scenario too, their score difference cannot change if that scenario comes up, because they've already played Easttown and Confy. So now, imagine me trying to explain that.
It's not just because Carbery are celebrating their 100 years this year at all.
Oh, exactly. Well, listen, the Easttown Confy game, you have to hand to Easttown, like kind of getting themselves, make sure they were back in the mix, because a lot of people were probably slightly worried about them at the beginning of the year. I know people that were talking about players that they were missing over of those first couple of games, but Easttown, as I keep mentioning as well, and it was very noticeable last year. I think last year's how to caught people on the hop is how well conditioned they are. And at this stage of the championship, when games get tight and get gritty, this is when that kind of condition comes through. But like they're going to get absolutely nothing easy off Confy. See, Confy the last day they brought Cara to within a point and probably should have won the game. By all accounts, I think Richard Jury, I think you were at it. Pat was commentating. You commented.
Could have got a decent draw. Could have got a draw. Yeah.
Pat, sorry, you were actually commentating on it yourself and the great Jim Flano. But that was one of the games of the championship. So that was by all accounts fantastic. So, and Confy, if anybody thinks that Confy are just going to lay down, we'll see how we go on the relegation final. Then they haven't been watching Kildare football for the last few years. There's the last thing of a dying wasp, as they say. But Confy Easttown could be an absolute cracker. I can't even call it, to be honest, and I'm not going to. So, best luck.
Richard, you and I saw the Confy Cara game. Excellent game of football, you have to say. And will Confy, they were devastated that evening, can they build on that, or will that have an effect on them, the disappointment? And obviously the hurlers did poorly last week as well, and a number of the dual players on that.
I mean, Tommy touched on it there. Confy as a club, be it hurling or football, in fact, always seem to find that one win every year that keeps them senior, and they're past masters at it. What impressed me about them the last time against Cara was normally Confy are very solid, strong, Maybe, not so much flair, maybe, but they eke out the wins. But this team against Cara the other week they were flying. I mean, they were pacey. They had like David Slattery back, but they've plenty of younger lads as well, plenty of pace in the front line as well. The lovely hand passing movements, just generally really good sort of football that Jim Gavin and the FRC would be delighted to see. And they were a little bit unlucky. I think Cara were just about the stronger team, in fairness, and I think it would have been unfair on Cara to lose that one.
Richard, we've been talking a lot about Johnstown Bridge, as regards the standings that we do and where they are at the moment. But Confi put it up to Johnstown Bridge for a large part of that game, and for certain periods they were better than Johnstown Bridge, and it was because of the pace they moved the ball, how much they swarmed them in defence. They knew the danger men, they knew where to focus their defence. So absolutely.
So I mean, I'm talking up Confi here. I'm still probably would slightly go with Eadstown, I think, but again, it's another 51-49 call on this one. I'm actually covering this one. I'm really looking forward to this one on Saturday evening.
Yeah, and I'm covering Carberry and Cara. I'm looking forward to that one as well, because to me, Cara have been a very exciting team this year. Coming up from the intermediate grade, they might have struggled for a year, but they've done quite well in championship football anyway. I would think, Richard.
Yeah, and they've recovered well. Like that game against Raheens, obviously they would have had that in their sights, the preliminary round, the local derby. From whenever the draw was made, and that must have been very disappointing for them to eventually lose out. They stuck with Raheens for a long period of that, but eventually I think fell away by about 5 points. So they've recovered very well with their 2 wins here, but it's still all to play for from their perspective as well. So they need to go out and get a result here against Carberry, and Carberry will be stung, I think, by losing that game to Eadstown after a couple of good performances before that, and they've owned Cully in flying form. They've Aaron O'Neill back now. I'm not sure about Tommy Gill. He missed the last game. I think there was a hamstring injury there. So if he's back, Carberry will be strong. This is another toss-up to some degree. I'd slightly edge Cara, but not with any massive confidence there either.
Okay, I'm going to ask each of you an awkward question now. Ger, the team